Wayne Newton is 83 years old and still working. While this sounds like great news for fans who think it's special to see Mr. Entertainment perform again, some people think Newton is still performing in his 80s because he needs the money, not because he loves it. This idea has left fans wondering how an amazing performer like Newton, who was so successful as an artist, ended up with one of the saddest stories of life on stage. He was actually called Mr. Las Vegas because of his incredible number of sold-out shows. He ended up losing all his money, got into serious debt, and spent years in court fighting tons of legal cases. Let's take a look at how Newton became a warning story and still managed to put the pieces back together to keep his career important. From the very beginning in Norfolk, Virginia, Newton was all about music. He had a natural gift of perfect pitch, but even as a kid, he worked hard to get better and learn more skills, instead of just relying on natural talent. When he was just 6 years old, he was learning the piano, guitar, and steel guitar. This was even more amazing when you realize that young Newton was fighting serious asthma as a kid. His health problem was so bad that his doctor told his parents they would have to move somewhere else for Newton to have a better life. Keep in mind, his parents weren't rich at all by the time the family moved to Phoenix because of the doctor's advice. Newton's father was working 2 jobs to support the family. Having a father who was working so hard to put food on the table inspired Newton to take action. Seeing how driven Newton was, his parents decided that if he was going to keep performing, his older brother would have to work with him so he could watch over and take care of young Newton, who was barely a teenager at the time. Soon after moving to Phoenix, the brothers heard about a local television talent show called Lou King Rangers, and they signed up for the competition. And this was not an easy talent show. As Newton himself said, 2 kids in a duo had to do 6 shows a night against groups that had 6 and 8 people. And it was a spinning stage, so there was no time to set up or take down equipment. When it was your turn to be on stage, you pressed a button and it spun around and boom, you're on. He and his brother performed playing steel guitar and they ended up winning the talent show. Newton said that it was a great experience and it gave him incredible training. After winning the competition, the owner of Cool TV, Tom Chauncey, who also broadcast the talent show, gave the brothers their own television show, Rascals in Rhythm, and became a mentor to them. And on the weekends, Newton and his brother as the Rascals in Rhythm were performers in traveling road shows at the Grand Ole Opry and on ABC TV's Ozark Jubilee, which had President Dwight Eisenhower watching. This exposure got the brothers more jobs than they ever imagined, and they were still going to school. Newton himself went to North High School at the time. You would think that with all the time he had to spend on practice and actual performances, he would be at best an average student. Not this kid. He was the class president for sophomores and a member of the junior ROTC training program. No wonder he was making big steps in his music career. For him, whatever he wanted to do, he gave his best and more. However, near the end of his junior year of high school, Newton would make a surprising decision. A talent agent from Las Vegas had seen him and his brother performing on their local TV show and decided to take a chance on them. They not only passed the audition, but impressed the agent so much that he signed the brothers right away and scheduled their first performance in Las Vegas at the Fremont Hotel. The boys, staying true to their talent, did great, and by the last night, were offered a 1-year contract to keep performing in Las Vegas. And at this turning point, Newton made his choice to leave North High School just before finishing his junior year to chase his music career. Of course, this wasn't a decision his parents were happy with, but Newton was determined and off to Las Vegas he and his brother went. This decision would later turn out to be important for his career. One day at the Fremont Hotel, the agent who had signed Newton told him about Jackie Gleason, who had been taking a break and was now coming back on TV. Gleason was passing through Phoenix and had decided to have a lunch event there. Luckily, Newton had gotten booked to perform at the lunch event, but he had a problem. He didn't know any Irish songs, so he had to learn the song Danny Boy on the drive from Vegas to Phoenix. He finally got to the lunch event, performed his songs, and ended with Danny Boy. Gleason was so impressed, he stood up and said to Newton, "Don't go on any other TV show before you go on mine." Through Gleason, Newton would get his first chance on national television. However, since they had no hit record, all they had going for them was that spot on Gleason's show. So to keep staying in New York, their manager got them a job at the Copacabana Lounge. It was while they were still working with Gleason that Bobby Darin, a music producer, signed Newton to Capitol Records and started working with him to make his first record. The first song Newton did with Darin was called Heartache. Then they worked on Danke, Shoen. Danke, Shoen became a huge hit, reaching the top 15 on the Hot 100 chart. His songs were becoming major hits in pop culture, and many other famous celebrities like Lucille Ball, Jack Benny, and others helped him get bigger by using him as their opening act for their different shows. Newton's fame soon reached the point where big media companies offered him his own show. However, he turned them down because he didn't want his career to be controlled by others. Around this time, Newton and his brother ended their partnership. They had worked together for almost 10 years before the split, and this was what Newton had to say about it. "My brother never liked being in show business. So, around 1970, he said to me, 'I don't really want to do this.' I said, 'Why are you doing it?' He said, 'My parents told me to look after you.' I said, 'Well, I'm all grown up now, so if you want to leave, go ahead and leave and do what you want to do,' which is what he did. Now, Newton was by himself, and the only way to go was up, and after the shocking death of Elvis Presley and several other legends in the business, the spot for the biggest entertainer in Las Vegas was wide open. To be honest, Newton was the only person who could fill that role. He was headlining big events and even held the record for the biggest crowds at those shows. In fact, he was called the biggest money maker in Las Vegas history. Nobody draws crowds like that week after week. Not Elvis, not Sinatra. There's just no comparison. When you are competing with Elvis and Sinatra, then you know you've really made it big. Newton signed a new contract to work 36 weeks a year for Howard Hughes' Suma Hotels. This great deal gave him enough money to buy a ranch home where he raised expensive Arabian horses. But as the years went by, Newton became more and more restless. He wanted to be more independent and not have to answer to a boss. To be clear, he had no problems with his boss, Howard Hughes, and there wasn't any report of bad feelings between the two. Newton was just wanting more freedom, which was completely his right. So he began to look for ways he could make more money and move up financially. One of the business opportunities that caught his attention was the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Getting control of the hotel, however, turned out to be way more stressful than he expected. For one thing, he had never been good at managing his money and had left many important money decisions over the years to people who didn't care about his best interests. Another problem was that Newton was brilliant when it came to entertainment, but had never been interested in the business side of things. And when it came to buying businesses, he was completely out of his league. For 2 years, Newton was part owner of the Aladdin Hotel in a partnership that led to a bunch of lawsuits and a failed attempt by him to buy the entire hotel. Before long, he was falling into money problems. In an effort to fix the situation, there are rumors that Newton had dealings with people who broke the law. The rumors were reported in the media, and Newton wasn't happy, so he ended up suing NBC News for libel, claiming the network had reported that he worked with the mafia to buy the Aladdin. In court, Newton won the lawsuit at first and was awarded $19 million in damages. However, NBC appealed the decision, and it was decided that there was no proof showing that the rumors had been spread either to hurt him or on purpose. So Newton got nothing in the end. However, what seemed like just losing in court turned out to be much worse. In 1992, Newton filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy to reorganize an estimated $20 million in debts, most of which he said he got while suing NBC for libel. Other people he owed were the IRS, which said that he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. Newton had hoped he would get some of it with the money he got from winning the case. Since that didn't work out the way he had hoped, he decided to work on a different way to deal with his money collapse. As the end of the year got closer, he joined Tony Orlando, and the two opened up a venue together in the city. The venue originally was called the Talk of the Town. Both of them had believed that with their combined fame, they were going to be able to pull crowds to fill the 2,000-seat venue. Unfortunately, they had really overestimated their popularity and got only under 1,000 people to show up. It wasn't long before the partners realized that they weren't making enough money to pay their rent, which was about $2 million, and the problems didn't stop at money. Newton had put himself in a very awkward situation, which made Orlando really angry with him. For some reason, Newton had hidden recording devices in a private room that he and his partner shared. The spy devices were discovered by Orlando's son, and this made him even more upset. With trust between the two partners destroyed, Orlando decided it was better for them to break off their partnership as soon as possible, which they did, and Newton chose to take over their venue by himself. By the beginning of the 2000s, the name of the venue was changed to the Wayne Newton Theater. This was one of the businesses Newton invested in as he tried to rebuild his fortune. In 2001, he planned to turn his house into a museum. That plan got him working with a company called CSD to turn his home not just into a museum, but a tourist attraction. CSD put around $70 million into the project, with $50 million spent on the renovation of the home and $20 million going directly to him. When Newton made this deal with CSD, there was an understanding that he would move out of the property. However, several years after the deal had been made, it began to look like the singer had no plan of doing so. All the while, the money that he owed the IRS kept growing. In August 2005, the IRS filed a lawsuit against Newton, saying that he and his wife owed more than $1.8 million in taxes and penalties. For years later, Newton was in trouble with officials at Oakland County International Airport in Waterford, Michigan. They claimed he owed the airport more than $60,000 for unpaid parking fees because of his abandoned $2 million plane. The jet needed repairs, and Newton didn't have the money to pay for them, so all he could do was leave the plane there. Eventually, he was able to pay to have the jet taken apart and shipped to his home, where he had it put back together in his backyard. In the middle of all this, Newton was taking wild animals into his care. In addition to many horses, his property has also been home to monkeys, sloths, exotic birds, and many other creatures. He couldn't even pay for their food. In February 2010, Bruton Smith sued Newton, claiming he hadn't paid back a loan he had personally promised to pay back, which Smith had bought from Bank of America. Smith wanted to take Newton's Las Vegas ranch, Casa de Shenandoah. The museum deal also came back to hurt Newton as another lawsuit over the Stop project landed on him. The lawsuit confirmed Newton collected $20 million with the understanding that he would move out and allow the property to be turned into a museum. The person suing claimed that he had invested $50 million in the project, but that Newton had refused to move out and had purposely stopped renovation. So, on December 17, 2012, a U.S. bankruptcy court approved the sale of Newton's Casa de Shenandoah to be listed for sale at over $50 million. The property stayed on the market for 3 years until Newton reached an agreement with Lacey Harbor, the businessman who owned 70% of the corporation that had bought Casa de Shenandoah, to turn it into a museum. Newton and his family moved back into the property, and in September 2015, the Museum of the House and Memorabilia was finished and open for public tours. It continued having public tours for 3 years before it was closed for a long time for renovations. While Newton might have been lucky to keep his home, there are still reports of debts worth millions of dollars that he supposedly owes to former friends. This by itself is something really heartbreaking and sad, especially when you realize that Newton didn't lose his money gambling or on drugs, but simply through bad management and bad investments. In 2020, Newton appeared in a TV commercial for Caesar's Palace. As soon as he could, he returned to performing. Newton continues to earn people's respect because he didn't just give up and accept how things were going. His return performing was not stopped by the fact that he hurt his back in 2021, something that would have made most people's age quit. Perhaps one of the biggest reasons behind Newton's decision has always been his loved ones. He has been married twice. His first wife was Elaine Okamura, a former airline stewardess. He was married to for 17 years, and their marriage gave them a daughter. His second and current wife is Kathleen Macron, a lawyer from North Olmsted, Ohio, and they also have a daughter. Newton is now 83 and is the main performer at the Flamingo Las Vegas Hotel when he is not performing. Newton spends his time with his family and his horses. He once famously said, "My two loves in life from the time I can remember were music and horses, and I couldn't decide which I loved more." Despite the ups and downs of Wayne Newton's life, you can't help but notice that the man has found himself a sense of peace, still in good health, doing what he loves doing best.